This is the CitizenLink Report.
If you find our insights helpful, would you support our video efforts? Your gift of $25 or more goes a long ways. Covers the crew, lights, cameras, all that. Just click on Donate. Thanks from all of us. Universal preschool, $9 minimum wage, more government, more taxes, more borrowing, more spending. That must be the State of the Union. This is the CitizenLink Report. I'm Stuart Shepard, along with our Executive Director, Tom Minnery. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Stuart.
Did you talk back to your television as much as I did watching the speech?
I did, but the fact is we're talking about the State of the Union now. We watched it, so you didn't have to.
I kind of wonder if a lot of people, both supporters of the president and those who question his policies, might have just taken a pass last night. We've seen enough of these over the years. This one struck me in particular, Tom. I've watched a lot of these, generally as a reporter or working at a TV station before I came here. This one, it sounded like he was describing a country that I don't live in.
Well, it was difficult to watch because it was a half campaign speech, half pandering to the left liberals base that he has. And I don't think even the president thinks a lot of things that he said are going to get passed because the man sitting behind him, John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, the man who is leading the Republicans in very difficult negotiations with the president. John Boehner had to sit there and look interested, look attentive. He did a good job at that. But I just wonder what was going through the man's mind, realizing that, hey, we've been here, Mr. President. There is no support for what you're doing in this Congress. Give us something that we can react to. Give us something that we can really be bipartisan about.
Well, and I was watching John Boehner for as much of the speech as I watched the president, frankly, and a lot of it, I just wanted to hear what was going on inside his mind. Tom, for 90% of the speech, the response, even from supporters of the president, was tepid.
It was. There was a lack of enthusiasm, even among those who obviously support the president, even among those who responded to what he said by standing ovations. It did not seem to have much enthusiasm.
Let's talk specifically about what he said. First, he proposed a universal preschool.
Tonight, I propose working with states to make high-quality preschool available to every single child in America. That's something we should be able to do. Every dollar we invest in high-quality early childhood education can save more than $7 later on by boosting graduation rates, reducing teen pregnancy, even reducing violent crime.
I'm not sure what evidence lies behind the president's assertions during his speech, but the preschool program we all know about is Head Start, and we do know that any effect of the Head Start training seems to dissipate by third grade, so it's not a big boon to little kids. I suspect the president was sending a subliminal message to teachers' unions saying this is an increased number of teaching jobs if we get this through, so these will be union teachers. So I think that's really where he was going with that.
Yeah, I think you're really hitting the point there. And that's two things. Once you step away from what it sounds like it's about for young children, it's really about government getting involved in children's lives earlier rather than having a parental influence at that early age. But also, as you mentioned, it would add a 14th grade, if you will, to public school, which means more teachers, more union members, more money for Democrats.
Well, that's right, and the unions haven't established themselves as a successful way of educating children.
Now, he did talk positively, and I would have to say admirably, about the importance of fatherhood, which is always good to hear. But when he talked about marriage, it was very precisely worded. Listen to this.
And we'll work to strengthen families by removing the financial deterrents to marriage for low-income couples and do more to encourage fatherhood.
Tom, best you can tell, what was he talking about?
It was hard to know exactly what he was talking about. I hope he was not talking about the idea of continuing welfare payments to mothers, even though those mothers might get married. Generally, when a mother marries the father of a child, you expect one of them, usually the father, to be the breadwinner. But if he's saying, well, okay, you can get married, but we'll keep the welfare payments going, I don't think that's a good solution. I don't think it will work, and I don't think it honors the American family.
And if you're really going to stand up for marriage, let's remove all disincentives for all levels of income, get rid of the marriage penalty tax, and in fact, we should give incentives for marriage. We should make it a favorable thing from a government perspective. Tommy was more specific about immigration reform. Let's listen.
Putting more boots on the southern border than at any time in our history, and reducing illegal crossings to their lowest levels in 40 years. Real reform means establishing a responsible pathway to earn citizenship, a path that includes passing a background check, paying taxes and a meaningful penalty, learning English, and going to the back of the line behind the folks trying to come here legally.
Tom, interestingly, a lot of what he said specifically sounds a lot like what we talked about right here just a few weeks ago.
Well, it does. And as always, there are many details that will be developed as the bills get written and introduced in Congress. But in broad outline, it does sound a lot like the group of bipartisan senators that put forth a plan to give comprehensive immigration reform. I was particularly almost startled by the president's assertion that those who have been here illegally must get to the back of the line if they indeed want to become citizens down the road. I don't know that we've heard him say that before, and that sounds like something that will appeal to conservatives who do not like people elbowing their way in the front of the line.
Let's talk just real quickly, kind of round robin style, about some of the other things that he mentioned. He said we should raise the minimum wage to $9 because it will help low-income families. Will it?
Well, the idea that someone can raise a family on minimum wage is a scary idea. That level, even at $9, is so low that there will be a lot of government assistance required before a breadwinner can support a family on that. Once again, it's the idea that we need more government help for people.
And historically, I mean, if you look at the studies that look at minimum wage, when you raise the minimum wage, it ends up there are fewer minimum wage jobs because it's an amount of money given for a value for a certain amount of work. And if the job doesn't bring in a certain amount of value to the company, they just won't have that job anymore.
Yeah, slower and slower, we're seeing that it's harder for young people to find summer jobs because employers tend to shy away from that higher minimum wage, and so teenage unemployment rises.
Tommy also brought up climate change. The exact quote, "The fact is the 12 hottest years on record have all come in the last 15. Now, I used to be a meteorologist before I came here to work at Focus on the Family and CitizenLink. So when I hear about climate change, I listen a little more attentively. That is the fact. I mean, if you go to the record, that's the best record we have. But there are questions about the temperature record, about how accurate it is. The records we have only go back to the late 1800s, which is 100 years or so. But in the entire history of the planet, it's not all that big a snapshot of how things have gone. But it also presumes a couple of things. His solutions are to have government do something. Well, that presumes a couple of things. Number one, it presumes that the warming we're seeing is because of humans. But there's no indication that we're any more than an insignificant factor in the temperature change that we've seen. Long before the Industrial Revolution, the temperatures of the planet went up and down, and sometimes sharply so. We were coming out of a little ice age in the 1800s, which explains a lot of the warming we've seen over the last 100 years. But more to the point, this. If you look at that same window of time he was talking about, the last 12 years or so, we've been flat temperature-wise. When you look at the record and average it out, I mean, it's always going up and down. It is essentially flat for the last decade plus. That means something significant. It means that the climate models that so much of the alarmism is based on aren't working. They predicted the temperature would be warmer by now. They didn't account for real live temperatures. They didn't account for reality, which means the climate models aren't representing reality. If we base policy for the future on those climate models, we're making a tragic mistake.
Sounds good to me. I appreciate that explanation.
We'll keep it summarized to that. Now, let's turn to Marco Rubio. He came on after, hang on a second. Okay, that is what you will hear on mainstream media, Twitter, Facebook, the nighttime comedians, perhaps Saturday Night Live. They're all going to talk about the awkward drink of water. It was awkward. We'll just verify that. But that's the way the mainstream media skips talking about what he actually talked about, which is some important values from a conservative point of view. Here, listen to this as he talks about the role of government in solving our problems.
And the truth is, every problem can't be solved by the government. Many are caused by the moral breakdown in our society. And the answer to these challenges lie primarily in our families and our faiths, not our politicians.
Well, there you have it. That was a clearest summary of the difference between the conservative view of the future and the liberal view of the future. About the drink of water, Senator Rubio has a lot of speeches left in him. He will figure that one out. He talked personally. He talked from his humble origins, his family background. All of that, I think, is a good messaging system to humanize those big philosophical differences he was trying to place between him and the president.
And I've been privileged to get to hear him speak in person 3 different times, and just to be honest, he can light up a room. The man can deliver the big speech when called upon, so don't let the drink of water fool you about where he is. Tom, another section of his speech, which I think was kind of touching, he talked about parents looking into the eyes of their newborn children, and he talked about maybe they were born into circumstances that were difficult to escape. Maybe they've made mistakes along the way. But then he said, in those eyes of that child, they'll see what my parents saw in me and what your parents saw in you. They'll see the hopes and dreams they once had for themselves. We need more talk like that.
We do. I was hoping for a moment like that from a conservative such as Senator Rubio, humanizing the numbers that Republicans frequently talk about, making all of this personal to families, to individuals, to the future. He did a good job, and we'll be hearing more from him without question.
I'll give you 30 seconds to summarize. What did you see overall from the speech, and where do we go from here?
More of the same. Where we go from here is more of the same. There'll be very difficult negotiations over those numbers, the sequester, the debt limit. I don't know where we'll come out on it, but tune in, so to speak, and we'll let you know what we know.
And it looks like it will be contentious between the House and the White House. And frankly, that's probably a good thing.
It is.
All right. Tom, thank you. And thank you for watching. I always appreciate hearing from you. You may write to us at mail@citizenlink.com. Do pray for our elected officials on both sides of the aisle. Pray for God's wisdom in their hearts, that they would make decisions based on what's true and what's wise rather than what's politically expedient. And remember, stand tall and be heard.